All right, let's take a look at where the Patriots are. As we're just a few days away from free agency, and you take a look at last season, they spent a record-setting $163 million in guaranteed money. This year, the team's expected to have around $9.5 million in cap space. Patriots finished last year 10-7, sixth place in the AFC, lost to the Bills in the wild card round, and this offseason, they lost their offensive coordinator and multiple offensive assistants. Bring in Tommy Curran, Breer for the deep dive right now. And I guess the question is, though, because it's not Tom Brady's Patriots where you had guys kind of signing up for less money. So what's the pitch to free agents out there? How do you say, hey, you should come to New England to come play for Mac Jones and the Patriots, a team that, as you said, Curran, is still building up?
The pitch is going to have to be money. I mean, the pitch can't be, we're promising you championships. The pitch is get in on the ground floor of a team that's building towards something and has been a dynasty. Get in with a team that has done it uniquely and has a legendary coach in charge of things. They can't throw the money the way they did last year, nor do I think that they really want to in some ways.
Yeah.
I think, Albert, that the Patriots have to find out in some ways what they got last year from some of the free agents who are still, like Jonnu Smith, for instance,
right,
or some of the draft picks.
And players talk. So I think one thing you can do is maybe try to turn guys like Matthew Judon and Kendrick Bourne into foot soldiers for you and say, hey, can you send a text to this guy? Can you make a call to this guy over the weekend so those guys know, hey, like the Patriots are coming, and then tell those guys what they did for you? Because you did get more out of Kendrick Bourne than the Niners did. You did get more out of Matthew Judon than the Ravens did.
We'll develop you.
Like, I think that that's a big piece of it is, yes, we're going to pay you. And a guy who's like going into a second contract isn't going to take less anyway. But like being able to tell a guy, this staff can get the most out of you, I think can have some weight.
Yeah, that's a great point on the recruitment is you can't throw the money you did at Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, but the recruitment pitch of we're going to help you realize something about yourself that you might not have found someplace else.
I also want to push back a little bit on they can't throw around money. They still have money. I know when we talk about how much money they spent last year, that's over the length of those contracts.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like they spent $163 million last year and now they're bankrupt and that's it. You can still move things around. You can still spend.
Yeah, but they're relatively close to the cap. So I do think that it's going to take some doing to create some space, and I think we'll see some of that. They also have some of their own guys like Devin McCourty, Dante Hightower. What do they do with those guys? So it's got to be like, you know, if they're letting one of those guys go, Tom, it's like, all right, now you need a middle linebacker. Now you need a free safety. That's kind of the trouble with what they're dealing with.
And some of the gymnastics, for instance, we talk cap and we talk, for instance, J.C. Jackson. Well, they couldn't take him at $17 million on 1 year. But if they were able to still maybe get J.C. Jackson back on a 4-year deal and you manipulate the contract and push it off, that's a way to save money. Hunter Henry, Devon Godshaw, Nelson Aguilar. You could rework all of those deals. Jonnu Smith and if you're chasing the particular person you want to. I just don't think the Patriots will be an early jumper and a splash maker in the early push to the tampering period.
They haven't been big on restructuring contracts in the past, but you've seen a lot of teams do it this year, and I've talked to some other teams about this that are projecting major jumps going forward. And so some teams
in the cap itself.
Yeah, because the TV deals go into the equation, not this year, but next year. The gambling money goes in starting in a couple of years. So you could be looking at the cap, which is now at 208, jumping to maybe 230, jumping to 260. Like you could have these $20-30 million jumps coming down the line. I know some teams are counting on that when they're doing some of these restructures.
The other thing, too, is when you look at the Patriots, and you mentioned that if you're still 2 to 3 years away, and Jonnu Smith maybe is an example of that. He didn't work out last year, but you're hoping that he makes a big jump in year 2.
Yeah.
How important is it when you're signing some of these free agents as guys that aren't necessarily going to be huge impacts this year, but are going to time out with what you're trying to do in 2 to 3 years?
Look at the tackle position, for instance. If you can look, Isaiah Wynn is a question mark. I think that he was as good as he was going to be in his first year in the league, and since then he's been unreliable and inconsistent, injury prone. So do you go and get a tackle, a swing tackle who might have upside to develop, and then next year you have a tackle? They have a lot of big ticket item needs. Corner, wide out. Edge, they could still use an edge. Trey Flowers released today. That'll be something we probably get to later on. And tackle. Those are big ticket items.
And you get used to, I mean, like they got so used to, and I think people around here got so used to them getting guys on the tail end of their careers. And that's really what they lose from the Brady era, right?
Yeah, ring chasers.
Like you're not going to have somebody trying to gravy train a ring, like you said. Like, so is a Chandler Jones going to come back? Buffalo might be a better opportunity. Kansas City might be a better opportunity. Denver might be a better opportunity for somebody like that. Von Miller, like those sorts of names, those guys are going to go other places. And I think you have to accept the fact that those guys are probably off the table.
Look at the 16 free agent class when they had McClellan, Chris Long, Martellus Bennett. There's guys who are missing on. They just collected guys who are like, yeah, I'll get on that thing. And, of course, they did go win a Super Bowl with those guys.
Yep, just a 1 or 2 year deal. Come here, get your ring, and move on. Let's move on to one of the biggest areas of need here in the free agency period, and that would be wide receiver for the Patriots. Taking a look at what you have out there. These are the top guys, okay?
Which is a good group.
Yeah. You got Allen Robinson, Odell Beckham Jr., Michael Gallup. Some of these guys obviously suffering injuries last year, including Will Fuller, who played just 2 years. By the way, these are Curran's notes on the side.
I know.
These are not, they're not official.
Very succinct.
Yeah, but you know which one stands out to me here is Christian Kirk.
But there's a lot of guys who are slots. Before you peel that down, Sarah and crew, look at all the guys who have slot ability. OBJ, Michael Gallup, Juju was a big slot, 6'1", 215. DJ Chark can play in there, Berrios, and Jamison Crowder. So, yeah, but go ahead, Giles. I'm just excited about the slots.
Is it realistic to say, hey, Allen Robinson? I know Phil was talking about it the other day. Is Allen Robinson really a guy that you're going to get involved with? Because you're probably, he's too expensive.
I'd love to see him here, though. Because I think,
is it realistic, though?
I mean, I don't know that it's realistic, but I just think, like, you see, there's some carryover. Like, he's played in the offense before because he played for Bill O'Brien at Penn State. And I just think he's the sort of guy where the defense has to account for him every time he's on the field. So he's going to make guys down the line like Kendrick Bourne better because now instead of being number 2, you're number 3. Instead of being number 3, you're number 4. I think the Patriots have a lot of good complementary pieces, Tom.
You're right.
If you throw a number 1 in there, then it changes the equation for each one of those guys.
There's nobody on their offense right now who an defensive coordinator comes and goes, what are we going to do out here?
Yeah.
And they had that with Edelman, and they had that with Gronk, and they had it with James White, and they had it with even Amendola, and they had it with Cooks.
Yeah.
All of those guys in the recent past, you show up and you're like, it's going to be a pain in the ass. They hoped to have had it with Jonnu Smith, and he just didn't grow into it in his first year, and you have to wonder if he's going to, but no one's dynamic enough. So Allen Robinson would probably be the most dynamic, but there's upside to Kirk. There's high upside to Kirk. Go ahead.
Kirk's fascinating. Kirk is a different type of slot, but I think it's sort of the type of slot that Alabama had when Mac Jones was there in Jalen Waddle. A guy who can get down the field. Like it would necessitate some level of change in the way they see that position, right? Because they've never had a guy who's sort of that downfield threat, like a Victor Cruz type of slot, but that's what he is.
That it's almost like the Cooper Kupp, and Edelman could do it, but it's where they're kind of those tight splits and everybody's in close and they're working out to the sideline stuff. What?
I like it. It might be good for the breakdown here.
Four down player too.
Ted Johnson and Phil break it down.
It's not all that interior stuff where Edelman's getting open on option routes. That's what you want your third down back for, which we didn't get into, but Phil did a great job on the website today detailing maximizing Mac Jones, and part of that was you got to get a third down back. So wherever it is, if you go get Allen Robinson, great, but you still need short area quickness.
But you don't think Allen Robinson's realistic?
I just think he's going to be expensive as hell.
Yeah. I mean, he's still 28. That's the thing is, like, so it's not like he's one of these end of the career guys where he doesn't have another big payday coming. He's as a third contract guy at 28 years old. I think I'm with Tom on this. I think he could command a pretty big deal.
What about Juju? I mean, here's a guy who was an 1,100-yard receiver as a rookie. I thought he was going to be unbelievable. I think he had 100 catches. He had 98 another year. And now he has sunk into just sideshow.
He's not a bad guy.
That's what I meant. He's not a sideshow.
But he's just a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you sign him, you're bringing something with him. Now that said, he does have experience being a number 1 receiver, and I do think that there is something to that. Like being a guy who's seen that sort of coverage before, who's had to have defenses, like you said, game plan against him. There's something there, and maybe because of the injury issues that he's had, maybe he's somebody who would come at a little bit of a discounted rate.
Well, that's part of it too, right? Don't you, even if you're going to draft a wide receiver, look at this and say, all right, who's a guy you can buy low on? And it feels like Juju Smith-Schuster might be a guy you can buy low on compared to what he would have gotten a few years ago. Or like a Will Fuller, who only played 2 games a year ago. I mean, that seems like a buy low guy who's looking to resurrect his career.
There's a ton of OBJ, DJ Chark, all of those guys. Injured DJ Chark, I believe it was at the end of the year. Or is that Gallup?
No,
with the Cowboys.
Chark was early.
Okay, yeah. Chark had the injured foot. Michael Gallup from the Cowboys, he only played in like 7 games. I would probably be a little cautious with him. But again, a fast guy who was injured all year. OBJ injured in the Super Bowl, so they might not be playing. You might be able to buy low on those guys, or they might be in-season added.
And the one that there's an
There's
interesting name that did pretty well against them last year, Cedric Wilson from the Cowboys. I don't think they're going to be able to afford him. I think they're going to pay Gallup. Like, I think part of the reason the Cowboys are letting Amari Cooper go is 'cause they're going to give Gallup $11, $12 million a year. Cedric Wilson's the one they want to keep. I don't think they're going to be able to afford to do it. So Cedric Wilson's a guy who had some success against you last year. You'll remember he made a couple big catches in that game. Maybe somebody that Bill remembers and thinks.
Oh, Cedric Wilson, number one. He was a pain in the ass on 4th and 19.
Fourth down. Yeah. Well, he also had that crazy 4th down catch on the sideline, too.
Yeah.
Boise State guy? Yeah.
I think
All
so,
right, let's get to the wish list. Let's go to Tom
Okay.
Curran's wish list here on what you want in free agency. Because, well, look, and this is a realistic wish list?
This is a realistic and Patriots needs-based wish list.
Okay.
And I had, at the receiver position, sticking to that predominantly,
Yeah.
Braxton Berrios
Braxton Berrios.
and Juju Smith-Schuster.
So I would put Juju Smith-Schuster ahead of Braxton Berrios.
I don't blame you. But Braxton Berrios, again, because it's tailor-made, you have to pay him maybe $7 million. And I know he was here previously, and that might make the Patriots recoil and go, no, it's $7 million. We just released him 2 years ago. But, Bill, I mean, you wanted to keep him around, and it didn't work out. And now he doesn't drop the ball at all, and he's productive for the Jets. Suck it up, bring him back, and make him a binky. Same thing with Juju Smith-Schuster. I think it makes everybody better. And then Devondre Campbell. We're not really talking linebackers today.
Well, that's okay.
But
He's
he's a
on the
good name.
screen.
Fast.
Drafted by Thomas Dimitroff, too.
Fast Atlanta linebacker, and the Patriots are dying for speed at the second level that isn't brought to you by a safety.
Right.
Yeah, and we're going to get further into the linebackers, as Curran mentioned, kind of later in the week. But, Breer, your wish list.
I couldn't help myself and put the unrealistic guy number one. That's Allen Robinson.
God bless him.
Just because I think you have to get the most out of your rookie quarterback, and I think when you've got the quarterback on the rookie contract, like that's when you strike. And I just like look across the AFC and what the Bengals have around Joe Burrow, what the Chargers have around Justin Herbert, obviously what the Chiefs have around Patrick Mahomes. And I just think you need firepower. And I think Allen Robinson, like I said earlier, changes the context of the rest of your offense. My number two guy is this guy, Foye Oluokun, who is a Yale guy who has been developed in the Atlanta system and has played in multiple systems. Now he's played for Dean Pease, so there's some carryover there in what they do down there now and what you're doing here defensively. And I think you need to add a 3-down linebacker somewhere along the line, whether it's in the draft or free agency. They need to get faster on defense, and that's code for getting faster at linebacker in the middle of the field. And then the number 3 guy for me is Marcus May. And that's in case they lose Devin McCourty. If Devin McCourty's gone, I think you have to have a young free safety here. I'm not suggesting they can get all 3 guys, but I think getting 1 or 2 of them would be a win.
I wonder, and we didn't do this, I wonder if we would prioritize McCourty over some of those guys.
Right.
For instance, as you just did with Marcus May, or where do those guys fit in the scheme of their expiring contracts? We didn't even get into the tackles and Trent Brown.
I think one thing on May that I think is interesting too, there's this trend across the league to play 2 high safeties over the last few years to stop some of these offenses that can strike really quick. Like the Patriots have over the last, I'd say 10 years, predominantly been single high, and that's because Devin McCourty is that good at that position. Being able to get a guy who has that sort of range back there, I think would be big if they want to keep playing defense the way they play defense.
And still fast enough to do that. Go
Real
ahead.
quick, I was going to say, Allen Robinson, not a slot guy, but you seem to like all the slot guys.
I do, because
But also, like, we talk about Allen Robinson like he's the number 1 wide receiver. In the Patriots system, do you have to be like a downfield guy there? Can you, well, we've seen Julian Edelman be the number 1 receiver as a slot guy.
you have to have a more potent downfield guy than Nelson Aguilar appears to be becoming. That's it. You just have to be a more sure-handed guy who's really going to make people move over. They hoped he'd be an 18-yard per catch guy. They'd hoped, I'm sure, that he would have 40, 50, or 60 catches, and he just didn't approach it.
To me, Allen Robinson would sort of be cleaning up the N'Keal Harry mistake. Like I think he is in a lot of ways what you hoped N'Keal Harry would be.
All right, well, let's free agency talk. We're also going to have draft talk coming up, too, which is maybe going to kind of sure things up as far as the wide receiver goes.